Happy holidays, everybody. Right here, white as the snow that is outside, is my latest purchase. A 1977 BMW 320i 4-speed manual. I recently purchased this as my first classic car project a couple months ago, and I have to say, I absolutely love this little car. It is so cool, so nice to drive, and it just seems so happy. Happier than it was in the first video on this car, where I had basically just bought it and it was suffering from lots of different issues, namely the brakes that just didn't even try, and the fact that on camera it wouldn't run right, kept breaking down, and it had a horrendously bad alternator belt squeak. But with just a little bit of tinkering, Michael and I got this car to a point where it's decently drivable, and it's good enough now that I can take you all on a review type tour of this car, and we'll be able to take it out on the road and see how it drives. So a bit of background, once again, I bought this car as my first classic car project for $1,750, which to me is kind of a steal given the fact that it's under 80,000 miles, has the full toolkit and a bunch of documentation, including the original window sticker, and it definitely wasn't originally green and repainted to be white. Yeah, this paint isn't the original color. There is still some rust dashed about. There's still plenty of issues that this car has, namely probably some vacuum leaks. The brakes still don't really do the braking job super well, but I still think I got this car for a pretty good deal. It was very, very difficult to negotiate the previous owner down to the price that made more sense to me, but I stuck to my guns, didn't back off of my offer. Here it is in my fleet, and I saved it from the scrapyard. Again, if the previous owner is to be believed, which is debatable. As I said in the previous video, this BMW 3 Series comes from the first model year of the 3 Series in America. The 3 Series started a couple years before that in Europe, before it actually came to the States. But again, 77 was the first year. This is the e21 chassis 3 Series, which again is the first model of the 3 Series. Before the 3 Series, if you wanted a two-door sedan from BMW, your only choice was the 1600 series, which later evolved to be the BMW 2002. Those are very sought after collector's cars, and the 3 Series that came after this one, the E30, in nice shape, is also a pretty sought after collector's car. But the E21 is in a weird space where it wasn't special enough for collectors to really want it. The E21 came about in the 1970s, where the malaise era and the oil crisis was in full swing, so a lot of cars from the late 1970s into the early 1980s aren't sought after by people, because for the car it was definitely a bad time. But the 3 Series owes its existence to this time once again. People wanted a commuter BMW that they could put their entire family in, that didn't completely break the bank, but also was still true to BMW's formula of a true driver's car. And I think the E21 definitely did a very good job. With that being said, let's take a quick tour of my E21. It's no exaggeration to understate the importance of the original BMW 3 Series. The 3 Series would go on to be BMW's basically best-selling model throughout the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s, before the X3 took over the crown, because people are annoying these days and want crossovers instead. I know, it sucks. As with every car, especially every European car, as time has gone on, the cars have gotten bigger, and look no further than the 3 Series as a prime example, specifically the wheels on the 3 Series. This car has 13-inch wheels. Not even kidding. 13-inch wheels that are held on with just 4 lug nuts, which is crazy. The modern 3 Series can be optioned with 19-inch wheels. 19. That is a full $5 sandwich from Subway that separates this car's wheels to the current 3 Series wheels. Also, the original 3 Series, the E21, was only offered as a 2-door sedan. There was no 4-door option. There was no touring. There was no convertible, unless you went for the coach builder Bauer version, but I'm not counting that as a regular production car. all you could get was 2 doors. The 3 Series has gotten so big that there is now a model below it that is more comparable to the size of the E21, but still much larger, called the 2 Series. This E21 is a very, very small car, and when you park it next to literally anything, it is pretty astonishing to see how much bigger cars have gotten. Here's a picture of my E21 parked next to a Tesla Cybertruck. It's, as you can tell, the Cybertruck is absolutely massive, but the funny thing is, both of them carry 5 passengers. It's worth noting at this point that if you got the American spec BMW 3 Series, it did come, unfortunately, with the pedestrian safety massive park bench impact bumpers on the front and the rear, which you can make an argument for that completely spoiling the styling, and partly I'd agree with you. Lately I've been a bit indecisive on whether I want to swap my car to be more Euro spec looking, which is more beautiful, or just true to what it is, an American spec car. I don't really know, but it's funny to note that the American spec E21 is 6 inches longer than the Euro spec version because of the impact bumpers. And yes, you can sit on them, which is nice. If it breaks down, you're waiting on the tow truck, you can sit and just chill out on that front bumper. But the changes to the American spec version of the E21 go past just the bumpers. Namely, the other big noticeable thing is the fact that the license plate isn't mounted below the bumper like it is in the Euro spec model. I think because of some regulation where the license plate had to be a certain height above the ground, that messed with the design of the E21, so the designers had no choice but to just simply move the license plate up, which isn't the best look. If you compare this to the look of a European model, it's quite obvious that the European model is a better looking car, but it is still timeless, it is still classic looking, and I still think it is absolutely beautiful. One thing that I love about these old BMWs is that they come with a toolkit from the factory. And I'm happy to note that my car has the full toolkit in terms of tools. I think it also came with a cloth, maybe some gloves. Mine just has the tools, but that's nice to know. And when you open the toolkit, it lays perfectly flat, level with the ground, so that it's not dumping your tools all over the place. It's a very nice German feature. Modern BMWs don't have that anymore. I don't think BMW owners, most of them, ever actually use the toolkits. So that's kind of why. I know I've used these tools a couple of times, which is nice. I really shouldn't. For such a small car, it is quite a large trunk, but nothing else really to talk about. Also, to open it, instead of like a button or an electronic release, obviously this car's from 1977, what you have is the keyhole. You press it in, the keyhole doubles as the trunk release button, which if you know classic BMWs, that's not a surprise to you. If you don't, the more you know. Like I said before, the E21 first generation 3 Series was only available as a 2-door sedan, which means getting in the back is a bit undignified, partly because of the fact there's only 2 doors, and partly because of the fact it's just small. It's a very small car. So I'm gonna get my feet under there. Okay. Fold the seat back. This seat is back as far as it can go. I'm 6'3", I'm very tall, so obviously in a tiny car like this, it's no surprise there isn't enough room for me to be comfortable back here. But honestly, it's not that much worse than the current 3 Series. In the current 3 Series, for me to be comfortable with the driver's seat in my driving position, I remember from that video that I did that I have to man spread, and either I man spread or I'm pushing the driver forward into the seat, because this seat should lock and it doesn't really, so I can just piss the driver off as much as I want. Which I wouldn't do if I were you. In terms of legroom, there is no legroom. You obviously have to man spread, and if you're fitting 3 people back here, it will be miserable, I'm sure, completely miserable. But it does have 3 seatbelt buckles, so you can legally fit 3 people back here. They will hate you if you do that to them. If I look around, I notice there's not that much design or style to the interior panels back here. What I have is basically a flat leather panel with some stitching in it. There is a little bit of an armrest right here, and of course, being a 1970s car, the obligatory ashtray for each rear passenger, because everyone smokes. Smoking is good for you. So you're gonna want an ashtray, and where are you gonna wanna put your cigarette? Out the window when the window is fixed in place. It's not fixed in place, that's the thing. Pull on this little lever here, window pivots out, and then you just push it out all the way, and now you have a fully vented window back here. So you can put your cigarette out with the ashes there, and you can hold it out the window. I'm sure that's one use for this vent window, or it's just nice to increase airflow back here by pushing these vent windows out a little bit. You do have speakers, Blaupunkt speakers behind you on this rear deck lid right here, which has some carpeting on it, like carpeting that you'd find in a 2-star motel, something like that. There's carpeting up there, 2 prominent Blaupunkt speakers sticking out, and you have a third brake light, which wasn't mandatory in the US for another 10 years. I have a feeling this one might have been added aftermarket. I could be wrong, but all I do know is that it doesn't work. So actually, one more thing to note in terms of safety, which safety isn't really a high mark with this car anymore, but in this car you do have shoulder belts for the rear passengers, which for a car in 1977 isn't bad, honestly. That is quite impressive to see. Okay, stepping into the driver's seat of the e21 3 Series. And what you notice right off the bat is that this couldn't be any further from a new BMW 3 Series if it tried, because this car obviously has pretty much no technology, no electronics, no gimmicks up here at all. In front of me, I have basic analog gauges that don't even have backlight on them. Instead of a backlight like what you've had for more modern cars, you have just regular light bulbs in the top of the gauge cluster area shine in orange. They shine orange light down onto the gauges themselves, which honestly is a nice relieving thing, because in this day and age, every car has a configurable gauge cluster where you can configure having a full screen map or some sport gauges or whatever. And even cars of 10 years ago had backlit gauges with screens and things like that. This just has lights that shine down on regular gauges. And in terms of warning lights, all I have is one for oil, my battery amps, my high beams, and when my fuel is low, and one single light that tells me whether or not my turn signals are on. That's all you get up front. You have a traditional mechanical odometer that slides around instead of a digital readout. You have a mechanical, actual real readout right there, which is a nice relieving thing to see. And in terms of buttons around the outside of the gauges, I have one for my fog lights that don't exist. I don't know why that's there. I have a toggle switch for my lights. I just pull it out to turn the lights on. And one for my rear window defroster, which I'm pretty sure doesn't work. On the right-hand side, you have some controls for your climate. You have one dial for your fan speed, which has a very nice tactile feel to it. You have a cigarette lighter up front. Of course, it's important to have that in a 70s car. Honestly, it's a far cry from modern BMWs, which have climate controls shoved into a submenu in the iDrive screen. Your climate controls are right here. Traditional climate controls, manual, with a nice feel to them. And in the center, you have a quartz clock that in this car doesn't work, so now it's permanently reading 11:18. Below that, you have more climate controls for the air conditioner, which in this car doesn't work. There's no belt on it right now, so at some point when summer finally comes back, I'll hopefully get that fixed. But you have some controls for your air conditioner. Below that, you have a hideous, awful aftermarket radio that's going to go in the garbage pretty soon. This is the last time anyone will be able to see it, so enjoy its hideousness while it's there. And in the e21, it's weird because it's almost like an afterthought. The way the screen and the controls are pointing up towards the ceiling of the car rather than, I don't know, towards the passengers, gives off the idea to me that it was a complete overthought. BMW's engineers designed the entire interior of the E21, then realized, oh scheisse, we forgot the radio. We have to put that in. So they just threw it in wherever they could find space. And later E21s had a better radio setup that had controls that actually faced the driver. Imagine that. But in this one, it's a bit of an afterthought. I know some Italian cars have weird radio setups, or some French cars as well, where it's like down here by the parking brake. I would expect less of a messy radio setup from a German car, but here you go. Even the Germans make some mistakes sometimes. Below that, of course, you have another ashtray. This is ashtray number 3, and this is the most important one because it's for the driver. And behind that, you have a 4-speed manual transmission. Later E21s got a 5-speed and a smaller engine. This one has the 2-liter engine and the 4-speed manual transmission, which is cool. It sucks to have only 4 speeds because you won't want to be driving it on the highway, but this was built at a time where the speed limit on the highway was 55 miles per hour, so you wouldn't want to go much more than 55 anyways, because you'd be breaking the law. So moving from the gear selector, you move back and you see there is no center console lid, there's no center console storage, there's no armrest right here. All you have is more of this glorious 1970s style carpet, and you have two prominent seatbelt buckles that stick out and your parking brake. One thing is that the door handle release is hidden in the grab handle on the door. You just pull up on it like that and then the door opens. And instead of power windows, you have traditional manual crank windows. And air vents are up on top of the dashboard, along with a couple warning lights over on the passenger side for seatbelts. And I believe it's, what does it say? EGR or something? Right now when I turn the key, it says fasten seatbelts, which I think is a really cool little feature that this car has. Some stuff to talk about in here, but mostly it's just basic and it's 1970s BMW as you would expect. I want to talk you through the hood opening process on this car, and in fact, lots and lots of old BMWs. Again, if you know old BMWs, you know about this interesting hood situation because it is a front mounted hood, and I absolutely cannot get enough of how cool it is, just the process of opening the hood. So pull on the lever right here and the hood pivots forward like that. And what you're meant to do after that is just pull on the back of the hood by the windshield, and you reveal the M10 4-cylinder engine. Underneath the hood here, you have a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that uses mechanical fuel injection to achieve a horsepower rating of just over 100. I think it was about 110. Later on, due to emissions restrictions, this engine went down to a 1.8 liter, which came with a decrease in power. It made just about 100 horsepower. This one is a real rocket ship with about 110, but this car weighs as much as my shoe, so it never really feels super underpowered when you're driving it. Again, there are still some problems dashed about, like it's struggling with its idle. It doesn't want to find its idle when I'm driving it. It stalls quite a bit. Sometimes you do still hear a little bit of a belt squeak, and the brake master cylinder is very much on its way out. And also might have a few vacuum leaks dashed about, but this car is healthy enough right now to take it out for a drive and show you guys what makes it special. So let's do that. I need to get into the correct apparel because leather driving gloves in a 1970s BMW just feels right to me. It really does. Now again, it's having a bit of an issue with finding its idle. Also, for some reason, the brake pedal, when you press the brakes, it makes the engine rev for some reason. But that has been actually quite helpful for keeping the car running at a stoplight. You can hear that hissing sound. That's the sound that you hear when I'm on the brakes. So all my passengers know when I'm braking, and I know when I'm braking, and it's very annoying. As you can probably see, this car is running and driving in a healthier state than it was in the last video with this car. Last video with this car, it was not happy. It broke down several times, and it was a bit embarrassing on camera. Funny, I might add, but a bit embarrassing. And I think that was just the fact that it was pretty much out of gas. All I had to do to make the stalling while driving issue go away was to put gas in it. And I put good quality gas. It might have just been the fact that it was out of gas. It might have been the fact that it had some crap left in the tank that was being sucked through, and now it's gone. And now it's a happy car, and I see my vent window is opening back there, so the audio is gonna get worse. Driving a car that is much, much smaller than every modern car already, but also has basically no crumple zones, no airbags, doesn't have seatbelt pretensioners or anything like that. There are safer feeling cars that I've owned and driven, that's for sure. But are there any cars that feel as pure as this that I've driven or owned? And that's a different answer, a more positive answer. Everything about this car is mechanical, old school, old-fashioned, but not in a way that makes it super difficult. When it comes to the manual transmission, the clutch and the gear shift action, it is the easiest manual transmission car I've ever driven, and I mean that. Listen to that. Everything about this car is mechanical. Nothing about it feels restrained or softened to make it more modern, like how modern cars have more sound insulation and are quieter to the point where they have to pump sound through the speakers. This car, every single noise you hear from that engine up front, every single noise you hear is just authentic. It's pure mechanical sound. This 4-cylinder has nothing added to it to make it sound sporty or crazy. This is just how this car sounds. The sound is pure 4-cylinder. The clutch is very easy, very linear. And then my experience was just ruined by a truck driver. I've got a cable-driven mechanical throttle at the disposal of my right foot to control all 110 horsepower that this car has. There's no rev match assistant, there's no anti-lock brakes, there's nothing added to make this car more usable. It's just engineered properly from the factory that they didn't have to add any safety nannies because there were no safety nannies. This car had to be just engineered properly to be easy to drive, and it is. Yeah, the gearing is so long in this car because it's a 4-speed. You can really get on it in first and second gear. Once you upshift, you're completely out of the power band again. You get a sense when you drive this car that it's just so well put together. Everything about the engineering, about the driving experience is just done well to the point where there's no computer electronics that are needed to make it safer, to make it easier, or to make it more fun. This car is just pure mechanical BMW driver's enjoyment. And no car today has this kind of feel. That's what I love about this car, is that it's just authentic, but it's still a BMW in its BMW ways. Furthering that point, my turn signals don't work. This car is an absolute joy. Absolute joy to drive. Every time I get behind the wheel of this car, it makes me smile and it makes me happy, and that is the point of a special car. I've been struggling to find a car, a weekend car that I could really just drive when I'm feeling down to make me feel happy, or something to be proud of, to take to shows, something interesting. And I was thinking C4 Corvette, I was thinking Z3 supercharged Mini Cooper S. I did a video on that, you should go check that out. And what I ended up with was something that I didn't expect, but man do I love this car. I love everything about this car. I love the way it drives, I love the way it feels. I love this car, and I'm never, ever going to get rid of it. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, do all the normal YouTube stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.